ask the movement be vindicated and to the one-party rule, and we should hold people accountable for the massacre.
Mr. Raymond Chan. Last year, because of the backlog of business, we couldn't have an opportunity to debate June 4th. This year, we didn't miss this opportunity. This may be a short motion, but it's very controversial. 1 year, the wording of the motion was do not forget June the 4th incident. And we feel that to call it an incident is to bury the truth. We did use the word to vindicate June the 4th. This year, we have regard to the large-scale commemoration activities. I think it is the Communist Party that cannot forget June the 4th, because when June 4th approached, all the Weibo, all the platform cannot send any text. The June 4th candlelight vigil, according to the Hong Kong Alliance, the number stood at 110,000. But in the eyes of the Communist Party, each candle is a thorn in the side. It is something that cannot be taken for granted, and we cannot take it for granted that we can organize the large-scale commemoration events. I'm sure that the Communist Party will crack down on freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. Just imagine one day we cannot organize any more large-scale June 4th commemoration vigil. What will become of Hong Kong? Those who disapprove of these events, will they be in support of that? It is clear that the mainland is cracking down on Hong Kong, and the freedom of speech is getting more limited. The Communist Party is cracking down on the commemoration of June the 4th. Now, one of the evidence is that 4 members are being stripped of their councillor seat. Now, Mr. Nathan Law, before taking the oath, said that he would not bear allegiance to a regime that murdered its own people. Now, Mr. Law didn't mention any regime, but it was taken to mean that Mr. Law didn't bear allegiance to the the People's Republic of China. Now, anybody who oppose the regime that massacred the people would be regarded as not swearing an oath properly. Now, they're trying to wipe out the voices that try to vindicate June the 4th. The Communist Party is doing this not just among members. Now, earlier, Mr. Zhang Dejiang at the Basic Law seminar threatened that Hong Kong's governing team should be composed of those who are in support the resumption of sovereignty over Hong Kong. They should be patriots. Whether the public officials are in support of the mainland, there is a supervisory role. If Mr. Law doesn't bear allegiance to a regime that murdered its people, then he would be regarded as not supporting the mainland. If a judge were to shout these kind of slogans, would he be regarded as not patriotic and then lose his public office? President other than wiping out any voices in the council and in the government, they are creating white terror in the community. A lot of actors and actresses in the entertainment field have shut up about June the 4th. The actors and actresses who say no to the mainland are shut out by the mainland. Those singers and artists who record the songs regarding freedom, where have they disappeared to? Now, for those entertainment people who walk into the candlelight vigil without wearing a mask, I salute them. Last week, CUHK published a statement urging people to stop commemorating June the 4th. It is said that this is using people's moral emotion to gain political mileage. I don't really want to comment or blame the young people for that. I fully understand their sentiments, but although I feel that the sentiments are wrong, they shouldn't be harboring this kind of sentiments. If you're not interested, if you are unfeeling about June the 4th, it doesn't matter. Even in Taiwan, the Sunflower Movement, the Umbrella Movement, Taiwanese are also concerned. In Taiwan, they've endorsed the same-sex marriage. We are happy about it, and there is a connectedness, and I think we have to mutually support one another. With these words, I support the motion. Mr. Roy Kwong, President. Just yesterday, I received an email from a primary 3 student. This is a genuine email. It is not the 5-year-old kid that C.Y. Leung kept referring to. This is very touching. Why is it that politics is something that people stay clear of? Now, when we asked the teacher whether the 4 policemen should be prosecuted, the teacher said yes. When I delved further into that, the teacher said a school should be politically neutral. Mr. Kwong, why did we have June the 4th? We haven't seen any answer in the book. Some said that on June 4th, they were burning, they were incinerating rubbish in Beijing. And if they incinerate the refuse, they wouldn't have used the tanks. Why did the teachers discuss this with us? Is it that the Education Bureau tried to silence us? That this is from a primary 3 student, and he's writing this email asking me questions. I'd like to take this opportunity to respond to this. Why is it that the teachers would be unprepared unwilling to talk about this with the students? This is precisely the reason why Dr. Helena WONG wants to move this motion about June 4th, because we can't forget what happened in 1989. Honestly, in 1989, I was 6. I probably don't know what actually happened. Lu Xun, the writer, said protest is something that happens in all countries. It is not a hanging offense, but China is an exception. Lu Xun referred to the tragedy, the 318 tragedy. Today, faced with this June 4th tragedy faced with this bloody crackdown, this quotation still fits. June 4th is a movement where students objected to corruption and wanted more democracy under the autocratic leadership of Deng Xiaoping. He rejected Premier Zhao Ziyang's demand, and eventually there was a bloody crackdown on June 4th. Student movement came to an end. Every year in Hong Kong, on June 4th, there is a candlelight vigil. Some argue that 28 years on, we have to bring this to an end. This is a China issue. This is not a Hong Kong issue. But June 4 incident does have an implications on the democratic movement in Hong Kong. 28 years ago, the students and workers in Beijing engaged in the movement against corruption and bribery. If you look at what happened in Hong Kong, UGL involving C.Y. Leung, the Causeway Bay bookstore, Rebecca Lee, and NPCSC are rejecting the idea of genuine universal suffrage. Hong Kong is under a lot of pressure. History is a good guide. In 1984, June the 4th has not been vindicated. It truly happened in Beijing, and there were a lot of witnesses from Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, we have this established system. We have democracy and freedom. We have to uphold all of these. On June 4th, 1989, there were students who took the bullets, who tried to block tanks, and their belief was very clear. They hoped that this city, this country would have democracy and become a strong nation. It's not the kind of strong nation that we have today. We can't forget June the 4th because we have the conscience. We want this vindicated. We cannot allow those who shed the blood to do so in vain. It was said that people's struggle is a struggle between remembrance and forgetfulness. We don't have to be there. We may not be the first person victim. In my generation, through the video, through the clips, we learned about what happened on June the 4th. Some chose to forget, and some ran statements in the newspaper in support of the patriotic movement. C.Y. Leung chose to forget. He is not true to his own conscience, and he acted as if nothing ever happened. But we cannot do so. And we will pass on this message of vindicating June 4th, because this is a gaping wound. We have to remember this particular message and pass it on.
Mr. Jeremy Tam, President, 20-odd years have passed since 1989. Many people would think that the memorial service is no longer carrying any significance. Every year, we hold a vigil to commemorate that incident, and some say this has become a ritual. And what's it for? My answer is simple. You are not accountable to anyone for this. You don't have to explain why you do this. You don't have to care about what people say about you on your Facebook account. You're only accountable to your conscience. That's all it takes. That's all. If your conscience tells you that what happened on the 4th of June 1989 is simply wrong, then you don't need reminding. You remember June 4th. At the Victoria Park, the candlelight vigil, the held there will have your participation. Hong Kong is the only place in China where such a large-scale assembly can be had, telling the world that Hong Kong people have not forgotten this incident, and we tell the world that the Hong Kong people do care about this, and if you care about this, you will not forget what happened on the June 4th that year. To many people, it's the distant past, or it's something that has left a very deep impression on you. But to me, it's a life-changing event. I was informed too in 1989. Because of the June 4th incident, my family members thought it was time to take refuge somewhere. I was sent off. I didn't come from a wealthy family. My family exhausted whatever means we have to send me away. It's because of fear. We didn't know what would happen to Hong Kong after 1997. As if this earth will explode at that time. And then they thought, how can we send this kid away from this planet, send him to the space by having him boarding a spacecraft. So it was a life-changing event for me. Some people ask, what's June 4th? This June 4th incident got to do with us? It happened on the mainland, but actually generations of Hong Kong people have been affected. Many people emigrated with all the family members because of this. Of course, some opted to remain. And because of the June 4th incident, many companies decided to change their domicile. We can forget. It's easy to forget. I don't want to remember this. No one wants to commemorate this or to mourn for these people. Every time, every year when you do this, when the TV stations broadcast the footage, the old footage again, your heart will be impacted on. We're talking about people who were alive. Well, and it's also a mirror that would reflect people's true nature. When back in 1989, the C.Y. Leung ran an advertisement to condemn this. In the city forum, Mr. Tam Yu-jung censured the regime, the Chinese regime, for being a killer. So what will Mr. Tam say today? Well, history should not be distorted. You cannot change what has happened just because you are in power. It's said that history is written by those in power. We all know that. But one thing can never be changed by the power that be. That is your conscience. Your conscience cannot be changed. But of course, if you want to ignore your conscience, when people were killed, you want to deny it, and you said that there was no tank running over innocent people. Well, where's your conscience? Well, you should be ashamed of yourself. You're not a Hong Konger, you're not a human being. There should be no need to debate about the June 4th incident. If all people in Hong Kong think that this should not be forgotten, why is there a need to have a debate like this? But in Hong Kong, we do have people like that who have lost their conscience. They said as if they would tell us that this had not happened. It was the computer graphics which was available more than 20 years ago. Are things clearer now than in the past? I think the answer is most obvious. I would urge everyone not to forget June 4th, and let's have the vindication of June 4th. Professor Joseph Lee, well, this topic has been discussed in this council for many years. If we are still arguing whether the June 4th incident did occur, I find this curious. As a teacher, I would say this is a historic fact. Every year around this time, there will be people trying to bring this up. And now Chinese history is not a mandatory subject. When we were young, we studied Chinese history. In the history textbook, we talk about the burying of a Confucius scholar by Emperor Qin Shi Huang. And now many people think that history is not really useful. It's not useful in the sense that it doesn't get you any good income. But in other countries, people think that history is a very good and inspiring subject. And now we have this motion moved by Dr. Helena Wong. We have to tell those who are listening that this is a fact, whether you like it or not. On the 4th of June, back then, the government in power deployed military forces to shoot civilians. Well, you cannot now say it's not a fact. Well, I remember the spokesman called Yuan Mu. This generation experienced that historical fact. Maybe fortunate or not, I don't think it's the right word to use. They are fortunate not to have to live through it. But we're asking that we should not forget the June 4th incident. Should we seek the vindication of this incident? You may say that history is history. There's no need for vindication. But this incident has ripped us, and we have wounds. And we didn't expect that the regime would shoot her own people. Since this is a historic fact, there's no way we can forget it. Hong Kong enjoys this advantage for 28 years in a row. We have been able to bring this up to refresh our memory. You can mourn, you can forget to, you can choose to forget, you can commemorate, you can do whatever you want. It's your choice. But I want everyone, especially the younger generation who were not there at the time, to remember that as a fact. They may have heard from someone, they might not have studied Chinese history as a school subject, but they know that there were things written by people, there were images recorded, and it's just like other subjects in contemporary or modern history. This should not be forgotten as a fact in Chinese history. In Hong Kong, for 28 years, we have been enjoying the freedom to bring up this historic fact, to mourn, to rub salt into old wounds or whatever. I hope in the future we will continue to have this freedom every year on the 4th of June. People in Hong Kong can still bring up the subject, saying that that many years ago on the June the 4th, this happened. You may be sad, you may want to have vindication, but whatever it is, this is a historic fact. Therefore, the motion moved by Dr. Helena Wong should be supported. First of all, this is a historic fact. It cannot be altered. And we want to have vindication for this incident which all Chinese people don't want. Since we enjoy the freedom of speech, we should pass it on so that this cannot be altered, this cannot be forgotten. And if Hong Kong can do this year after year, this is an indication that we enjoy the freedom of speech.
Ms. Tanya Chen. Thank you, Madam Deputy. This afternoon, we discussed the motion on the 4th June incident. To me, it has a historic value. Back then, I was a secondary student. The 25th of May, 1989 was the first day I took to the street. The typhoon signal number 8 was up. The uncle who led me out to the street has passed away. So my first rally started from Victoria Park and to end at Xinhua News Agency, that is at Queen's Road East. There was rain and tears. I spent a night that I can never forget. To me, is an enlightenment. But I think to many people, it's not just an enlightenment, it's a wound that has yet to heal after 28 years. In 1898, students asked for justice, they want to fight corruption, and then they were killed or they were tackled by tanks and machine guns 28 years afterwards. This party that had the blood of people in their hands still dare not face up to history. And we have pro-establishment members here, including Donald Tsang and Pt2, asked us to leave this baggage behind. Let's look at the economic development of China. If there were chaos, we wouldn't be able to see such golden days. But who has the right, who has the say that we should sacrifice human lives for the sake of economic benefits? I cannot really succumb to such arguments. In fact, suppression or the June 4th crackdown is still ongoing in another form. 28 years afterwards, the human rights and freedoms in the mainland are even worse than what it was 20 years ago. There was the democracy was done to allow people to post their views. When Hu Yaobang passed away, Beijing, the people were allowed to mourn openly. But if you ask people, well, people ask at Weibo, what is the date today? And that post was really deleted. So today, even the term today is a sensitive term, and Tiananmen mothers are still subject to a very close surveillance. They cannot openly pay tribute to their children who passed away. And even for parents who would like to ask for people to be accountable for those poisoned baby formula. They are being suppressed. And for human rights defenders or Mr. Chen Guangxing, who want to fight abortion there, was evicted out from China. And Mr. Chen Guangzhou, he was also prosecuted for some fabricated offenses. He's been jailed to 3.5 years. So people there cannot criticize their government. They are not allowed to speak on a number of issues. While they don't have to worry for food and shelter, I believe a really strong country should respect its people and should allow freedom. Without democracy, there cannot be good governance. Pro-establishment members would want us to look at economic development in the mainland only, but I would like to look at those who have been fighting for freedom and democracy in the mainland. How can we separate ourselves from the mainland when it comes to the fight for democracy? How can we stand alone in this fight for democracy without the mainland? There are strange arguments saying that we don't have to care about what happened in a neighboring country because what happens in Hong Kong has nothing to do with the mainland. I'm afraid I cannot agree. We can't have democracy because of the decision by NPCC on the 31st of August. People asked us to pocket that fake democracy package first. We have not progressed an inch. In 2014, there was the umbrella movement trying to fight for solution for people in the mainland. Try to support us, and they have been prosecuted for subversion, and then they have been sentenced to 4 years of jail. Last year, we had the Causeway Bay bookstore incident. Even people who didn't care for politics were shocked. So what's wrong with publishing books in Hong Kong? Mainland governments were not happy, and they were arrested, and they were videotaped, making confessions, and Mr. Li Bo was escorted back to make open statements, and then he was escorted back to the mainland. And the Hong Kong government doesn't feel the need to give us an account of what happened. And Mr. Li Mingzhi was arrested for trying to subvert country. And then that is also very controversial. We fight for freedom and democracy. We commemorate the June 4th incident without candlelight at Victoria Park. We mourn for the lives who were sacrificed 28 years ago, and it's also to caution us that we are not going to relent when it comes to pursuit for freedom and democracy, and we will not fear political suppression. Thank you. Mr. Hui Chi-feng. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I speak to support this motion, that the June 4th incident be not forgotten, and that the 1989 pro-democracy movement be vindicated to individuals, to society, to our society, to country, and to everyone. This is an important issue. So what is the June 4th incident? It's a big wound. It's a great pain to me. It is a big wound to our nation and to democracy. We still remember how harmless and unarmed civilians were subject to such brutal treatment by troops, and how come they were massacred. People may ask, how old were you, Hui Chi-feng? When that happened, I was 7 years old, but I can still remember those scenes vividly. My parents at home said that such footage must be videotaped. Otherwise, people would forget that the government would forbid us from mentioning it, and all those video recordings will be lost. They're trying to create terror using forceful suppression, trying to silence everyone in the community. So the incident was a deep cut in the hearts of many people, and the wound has yet to heal after 28 years, because the brave lives lost are still waiting to be vindicated. There is no proper conclusion or summary of what was learned in the incident, and that those people sacrificed themselves for the sake of freedom and democracy for the country, and their parents are still under surveillance and even detained at home. So even for their surviving parents, they are still living under the shadow of the June 4th incident. And what is the June 4th incident? It is an attitude, and it is insistence for truth and for justice. How people bravely stood up to this dictatorship, telling this government that it was wrong and that we will persist in upholding these values. The June 4th incident is an insistence. I'm sure many people in politics have the same insistence. Otherwise, we won't have more than 100,000 people going to Victoria Park to display this attitude of insistence. The June 4th incident is also a lesson to let the autocratic government know that the community will not be silenced because of brutal suppression. It is also a lesson to tell us that without democracy, the government in power can make grave mistakes. They can massacre their own people. We will remember this lesson. We will hold fast to this memory, and it's a lesson to tell us why we will continue to fight for democracy. Democracy is not a panacea to all problems. However, it can provide checks and balances to the government, and it will ensure that another massacre will not happen again. The June 4th incident is also an enlightenment for many young people in politics, including people like myself. The June 4th incident showed me the value of freedom of speech, freedom of association, and freedom of demonstrations. Hong Kong is the only place in Chinese soil where we can discuss June 4th incident openly, where we can commemorate the incident, and where we can mourn for the young people who lost their lives fighting for these values. So June 4th has very deep lessons and impressions for everyone in Hong Kong and in the mainland. So I insist that we continue to remember the June 4th incident and ask for the movement be vindicated. We must remember the lessons learned, and in our discussion of the June 4th incident, let's once again remember people who risked their lives for values of democracy and freedom, and to fight corruption and fight regression. We must remember all these things. And I appeal to young people. My generation or the younger generation to come should remember that the June 4th incident is about everyone. It has got to do with everyone in Hong Kong. It is a reflection of values and standards. Is also the moral bottom line for many people in politics. Given that this is such a sensitive issue, it will challenge and test our courage, whether we are bold enough or whether we have the moral courage to tell the truth. No matter what political ideology you have, I hope that the younger generation and people who are younger than me will inherit this insistence for the June 4th incident to be vindicated so that democracy can finally prevail.
Mr. Yip Kin Yun. Madam Deputy, it's been 28 years. June the 4th makes us feel a lot of pain. I'm sure a lot of us here in this council and many members of the public would have a lot of flashbacks about June the 4th, 28 years ago, whenever June 4th incident is mentioned. And they had a lot of hopes, and all the hopes were dashed. And they feel so much in distress. 28 years on, when we talk about this subject, other than feeling the pain, people, in particular Hong Kong people, feel some kind of glory. In any Chinese community, is there any place where people can commemorate June the 4th freely and has such a big following? This is our insistence on truth. We have the ability to express ourselves freely, and we are showing our heartfelt concern. Each year, we gather together. There are more than 100,000 people gathering together in commemoration. And there wasn't any serious organization. A lot of the participants would automatically remember what happened so many years back, and then they themselves, or together with their relatives and friends, would turn up in Victoria Park and hold the candles in their hand to commemorate what happened 28 years ago. This large-scale gathering continues in Hong Kong without any let-up. So time has not diluted our concerns for June the 4th. And our deep concern for June 4th incident, and this will continue in the days to come. Many young people probably don't understand why those who experienced June the 4th will have such a long memory. There are certain things that we may have an indelible impression, but 1 year or 2 years later, we tend to forget about them. But June the 4th, we didn't make any preparation. It just happened. And after it happened, each year, year in, year out, we commemorate the event for 28 years now. And this is something from the bottom of our heart. This stems from the deep memory we had before June the 4th, and how intense was the memory. I'm sure a lot of young people who haven't experienced June the 4th would find it hard to remember. We had 1 million people taking to the street. We had 5 or 6 million people. If you take away the children, the old and infirm, almost all the able-bodied adults have taken to the street. Miss Tanya Chen said she was a matriculation student. She was taking part in the march in the rain. in the storm. Hong Kong people tend to be apolitical, and that was the very first time Hong Kong people took to the street. They were concerned about those people who were far away, and they shed tears for these people. As teachers, we knew what happened in schools. In May, in June, there was the time for internal and external examinations. Many students were not in the mood for exams. Before June 4th, we saw what happened in Beijing on television, and the citizens tried to persuade the army and try to protect the students against the army. Now, all these are still fresh in our memory, and we were very concerned about the students. We were concerned what would happen when we woke up the following day. We were not just onlookers. It seems as if we are living in Beijing. Hong Kong and Beijing are closely bound up together. Mr. Lam Yiu-kung talked about 28 years ago, and the Beijing students talked to him, and the students said that you have to go back alive. Hong Kong people have done so much, and you have to tell the world what happened in Beijing. We didn't let them down for 28 years. We continue to tell the whole world what happened. We never forget what happened. I think we have to be true to our conscience and let the younger generation what actually happened. Right, please stop, Mr. Yip. Mr. Andrew Wan. Madam Deputy, a moment ago, many members shared with us their personal experience about June the 4th. I, like Ms. Tanya Chen, was a matriculation student. That was the first time I took to the street. We went to the Victoria Park in a typhoon, number 8 typhoon. I think we all remember how 1 million people took to the street. All these are vivid in our memory. Also, in local history, June the 4th was a very important incident that made a lot of people aware of the value of democracy and the importance of seeking the truth. Madam Deputy, in the Tenement Mothers website, there is this Mr. Fong Zheng, who was injured during June 4th. He said a tank was rapidly moving from east to west, and they're moving towards the students. And I pushed a female student to the side of the road, and at that moment the tank was very close to the pavement. It was very close to me, and the cannon seemed to be right in front of me. I couldn't dodge it, and I rolled over on the ground. And my half of my body was stuck in the track, and I was rolled over. I was run over by the tank, and I was dragged along for a long time. And I rolled over to the side of the road, but then I passed out. Subsequently, I knew that I was sent to hospital for treatment, and I had to have my legs amputated. And 1/3 of my legs, my right leg was amputated, and half of my left leg was also amputated. I was there in the hospital until June the 24th, and June the 11th I was interrogated, and After I was released from hospital, I was interrogated by the school, and they asked me to keep quiet about the whole thing. In 2005, there was a book on June 4th. Madam Ding Zilin identified 116 victims with their names printed. There were so many people killed, and it was a high casualty. We don't know about the exact casualty. It is undeniable that this happened. Madam Deputy, June the 4th in 1989 is a tragedy in the history of China. It is a tragedy that tugged the heartstring of the Hong Kong people. And this is at the beginning of the rise of democracy, and it is a tragedy that is inhumane. And Madam Deputy, to get to the bottom of truth, we cannot forget about June the 4th. We have to have this vindicated. We have to hold those responsible, those culprits responsible for those who lost their lives. We do have the obligation. We have our conscience. Hong Kong is one of the few places on Chinese soil where we can commemorate June the 4th on a massive scale. I'm sure we have to be true to our conscience. We have to be true to history. There is no excuse for us to escape from it. Each year, when we have a debate on June the 4th, the pro-establishment members would shy away from it. Outside, and may say that we should not talk about June the 4th anymore. We don't have to talk about this with the passage of time. Some said that we have to look ahead, we have to look at the economic development in China. Others said that social harmony is important. There are pro-establishment or pro-Western organizations that said that there is no evidence to show that June the 4th ever happened. There is no evidence that people were massacred. I think this is really a distortion of history. They are apologists for the powers that be. Madam Deputy, lies will not become truth after being repeated 100 times. I hope that the pro-establishment members would face up to history. Only Mr. Felix Zhong was brave enough to leave a mark in history. 28 years on, the situation in China is getting worse, notwithstanding the economic development. But in terms of human rights, things are leaving a lot to be desired. Mr. Albert Ho has set up a concerned group to help the mainland victims to defend their rights. We haven't got democracy, freedom of speech, democracy. All these core values are hanging in the balance. We have so many arguments. Earlier on, we had a debate on UGL and on C.Y. Leung, on the misdeed of some of the pro-establishment members. These are chipping away the core values of Hong Kong. There are many young people who are questioning June the 4th. We have seen the rising localism and separatism. The pro-establishment members are saying that these are wrong. I hope that they would put on the thinking cap and reflect upon what happened. Why is it that people are so abhorrent of the mainland authorities? I support Dr. Hon Helena WONG's motion. I hope that we can remember June the 4th.
Does any other member wish to speak? Dr. Helen Wong, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to respond, and the debate will come to an end after that. Dr. Helena Wong. First of all, I'd like to thank 22 members who have spoken on this motion debate on not forgetting the 4th June incident, but it's regrettable that only one from the pro-establishment camp spoke on this. Where have the pro-establishment members gone? You claim to be people loving Hong Kong and people in support of quality democracy. Why don't you come back and speak on this patriotic democratic movement on the mainland? Since you want to uphold justice, why don't you say something to bring justice to the victims of the June 4th incident? The pro-establishment camp, in my view, is hypocritical on this. For 28 years, the Chinese Communist regime has stepped up economic development while suppressing civil liberties, and activists, lawyers have been incarcerated and prosecuted. We speak from our conscience in moving this motion. I urge all members to support this motion because the June 4th incident should be vindicated. In Hong Kong today, like the people on the mainland, we are facing the same authoritarian regime. I hope everyone would refuse to forget this incident. We should be at the very forefront to fight for democracy. We should unite with people on the mainland. We should call for the end of autocratic rule. And I believe that the June 4th incident will be vindicated sometime. I hope everyone will support this motion and release all the activities, vindicate the June 4th incident, and put a stop to the one-party rule, and let's build a democratic China. And I'll put a question to you, and that is that the motion moved by Dr. Helena WONG be passed. With those in favor, please raise your hands. Mr. Lam Chok-ting claims the division. The division bell will be rung for 5 minutes.
開始表。
Voting begins. Please verify your vote. If there's no question, voting is now closed and the result displayed. From FC members, 29 present, 9 for, 14 against, 5 abstentions. GC members, 26 present, 16 for, 9 against, 1 abstention. The question is not agreed by a majority of each of the, respectively, of each of the 2 groups of members. I declare the motion negative.
請各位肅靜。
Please keep quiet.
力嘅議案辯論打擊。
Debate on motion.